Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. He's here with a forecast, and Al, we had to deal with some pre-Thanksgiving snow this week. How are we looking heading into December?
Well, Troy, we have definitely seen some active weather this last week, and unfortunately because of the university shutdown, we're taping this a little bit early, so we're not going to give you a detailed weather forecast other than to say that the impending storm system that we talked about last week has shown its first signs of moving out into the western United States. We've seen the first initial surge of moisture, pretty widespread snowfall across central Nebraska, and the best totals I've seen have been in the 10 to 12 inch range. Really sharp cutoff to the east. And then unfortunately, we've had a couple more systems following it, and before we get through this weekend, it's probably going to be a little bit of a mess, combination of rain, snow, and into everything in between. And the best places for accumulation will be in the western part of the state. But more importantly, as we look forward into the future, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to catch you up on what my thoughts are in terms of the winter as we progress through this. And if you did go back here a little bit into this fall, you'll notice that we had a long stretch, particularly across the eastern half of Nebraska, of well below normal temperatures. In fact, Omaha went 24 straight days with below normal temperatures as we were caught into a large upper air troughing pattern across the eastern United States. As we got in toward the second half of November, we started to see a big surge of warm water moving below the surface in the eastern equatorial Pacific and coming up to the surface. It's about the same time we started to see this troughing action in the western United States start to really ramp up. Now, they expected that that pulse of energy will make it to the surface and then start to move toward the central equatorial Pacific over the next 2 to 4 week period, and behind that is another surge of cold water. So my thoughts are that we are likely to see a very active pattern during the month of January, oscillating strongly between above normal and below normal temperatures, with the northern plains most likely going to be the area that will see the most widespread below normal temperatures. Of course, snowpack plays an important role in this whole situation. And so if we do lay a good foundation of snow across the northern plains, then it's likely that any Arctic air that comes in will be kind of strengthened somewhat because you won't have warm surfaces and a bare soil to moderate that air mass, and so it'll keep a little bit more of its punch a little bit farther toward the south. And it wouldn't surprise me as we go into the month of January that we flip back into a mode that we've seen during the month of October, where we see more of these northwest flows aloft as we start to see the trough rebuild into the eastern United States. And more importantly, what we'll be watching for at this point is how strong the Gulf of Alaska storm system is, and will it continue to churn up that water and bring cooler water to the surface as the beginning of an onset of a La Nina event. The models are basically 50-50 on this event as we go forward into the future, but I'm watching that undersea currents in the equatorial Pacific, and there is support for those cooler trends to develop sometime in the second half of this year. And if that does occur, then of course we get concerns with dryness issues in the southern plains. But for right now, I think the biggest concern for us as we go through this winter is the flooding concern due to the excessive moisture during this past growing season and of course the late wet fall period, particularly as you move from extreme eastern Iowa and points to the east. So when the National Weather Service, in conjunction with NOAA, has issued a pretty extensive flood risk for much of the Corn Belt all the way through this winter and into next spring. Now certainly we're not calling for the type of a pattern that established last spring that caused our big bomb cyclone, but when we have this much moisture in our profile, we get concerned with flooding. And so if we get a large snowpack this year, then of course our concerns will be mirrored as we get into the spring. But fortunately, we have a long way to go before we worry about that. So from my perspective, please have a very safe holiday, and we'll look to see whether or not I'm right as we go through the next 3 months.